Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crosby, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. Let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have a very special, a very incredible guest. He is a University of Miami School of Law graduate and currently works as a partner at Goldberg, Segalla. He has held past positions as a partner at Clarke Silvergate and as an associate at Hinshaw Culbertson. I'm always butchering names with that stuff. We'll clarify afterwards. But excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Frank Ramos. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast. And ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate being a guest on your podcast.
Of course, I am just as appreciative to have you here today, Frank. Now, before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for going through my work history. I'm a civil defense lawyer here in Miami. Been practicing about 27 years in the area of product, commercial, and general liability. And in my spare time, I like to write, do a lot of presentations, and try to mentor younger lawyers and law students when I can.
Now, you are indeed the Miami mentor himself, self-proclaimed. I love that name very much. But let's get into what we love talking about. What we talk about in every single episode with all our guests, their unique journey to the law and law school. Because as we say, there is no straight path to law or law school. There's only your unique journey, and yours fits into that category as everyone else's does. Now, you were at Florida International University. You were there till 1993. And then that following year in 1994, you ended up at the University of Miami School of Law. Now, simply put, Frank, why'd you go to law school?
That's a great question. I had always been interested in pursuing a career in law from a young age, watched a lot of the legal shows we all watch as kids, and it always interested me. And something, when I got out of high school, I pursued a degree in political science, which was sort of default degree a lot of law students would get. Political science or English or one of the other liberal arts degrees. Then ended up at University of Miami, as you noted, and it was a straight path from high school to college, law school, and haven't looked back since.
Now, we always love talking about the first year. It's always difficult for some, great for others. Some people love it, some people hate it. But Frank, how was the first year for you?
It was challenging. It was a lot of work. It was much more work than college was, and it took some getting used to and acclimated to. Obviously, I survived it as most of my fellow classmates did. And looking back, I'm glad it's over. And I understand why there's a lot of concern and trepidation about law school, because it is challenging. It's competitive. The professors aren't the nicest folks in the world, and they're trying to create an environment that's somewhat akin to actual practice in terms of how hostile it could be at times, and using the Socratic method and other approaches. So, I don't know if I have a lot of fond memories of law school, but I appreciate I went through it and came out the other side, and ultimately passed the bar that summer back in 97, and have no regrets about that.
Now, in being in law school and being in this challenging environment, very, very challenging environment, there are many, things and obstacles you got to go through. You got to push forward. You got to work hard. You got to do all that reading. Now, looking back, what are some ways that you got through that challenging time, through that stressful environment? What are some things that you did, either that be, some strategies that you used to help you get through it, maybe, falling back on a support system that you had with the friends, maybe the family that lived in the area, anything like that?
I think the support system is a great approach. I think coming up with a tribe or putting together a tribe when you start in law school, you're probably not going to know anybody, depending on where you go, and you may not have any folks from college that you know. I didn't know anybody when I started my year in University of Miami, and so it was important to reach out, develop relationships, develop a network. These are people who are going to help support you. You're going to support them, and those relationships survive well after law school. I think that's a really important thing. And two, just keeping up with the reading, which was a lot more than most people are acclimated to in undergrad. So finding blocks of time, including nights and weekends, to make sure that I caught up with all the reading. That was probably the biggest challenge. The reading is dense. When you start out, you're reading cases that are 200 and 300 years old. It's old English, and a lot of terms you're not familiar with because it's a whole other language and a whole other vernacular. So it's a steep curve, especially that first semester. But if you stick with it and you go through it, you generally can do pretty well. Well enough that will land you a spot either on law review or possibly on moot court or something like that. And those are certainly good opportunities to pursue, later.
Yeah, the commonality between all of my guests have always been that the law school experience is always a huge, huge learning curve. Just like you said, you're learning a completely new language, a completely new vernacular. There's so many words that meant one thing in English that now mean something else in legalese, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. But moving forward in your legal career, in your law school journey, you then, right out of law school, became an associate at Hinshaw and Culbertson. Now, I know you referenced before that you are a civil defense lawyer, and in finding out if you wanted to be a civil defense lawyer or not, we always love talking about the significant question of finding out what you do want to do with the law, which is very, very important, always is, but especially finding out what you don't want to do with the law. So do you have any examples of any experiences, either externship, internships, clerkships, any just experience in general that you had that led you towards finding out, okay, civil defense lawyer is who I want to be?
That just kind of happened based on the jobs that were available at the time. I came out, I was looking for that crucial summer job between my second and third year. I guess it would have been 1996. I was my graduate in 97. And there weren't that many jobs out there. It was a tough market. Markets are cyclical. They go from being great to average to being very poor, and I was certainly on a down cycle there. And so, honestly, it was one of the few firms I was able to get a job with, and I took it and appreciated it, and still know people and speak with people from that firm many years later, even though I wasn't there all that long. And that's kind of I fell into it, and I think probably not what your listeners may want to hear, but sometimes depending on what the circumstances are, and there have been other ebbs and flows. Sort of the period after the great crash in 2008, 2010 through 2012 was a really tough market, and lawyers took the jobs they could get. After the pandemic for about a year, it was a really tough market. And that was and usually really bad markets are generally followed by really good markets, and you don't always get to control that. You don't get to control when you graduate from law school and what market you're falling into. And having been through that experience where I was in a bad one, I can understand and appreciate and understand where lawyers are in their career path. And when you find yourself in that situation, you try to find the best job you can in the circumstances you have, make the most of it. And maybe you embrace that, and maybe you don't, and maybe you hold on to that type of job until you find something different. For me, litigation, trials, things like that, I enjoyed. I don't know if I was looking for that per se, but that's what I started doing, and I stuck with it all these years. And right now, the market is pretty good. The market still is pretty dynamic for young lawyers. It's not probably as strong as it was a year ago. And maybe 6 months to 12 years, we may be in another cycle where folks coming out of law school may have a challenge. But if you are currently in the job market, just getting out, I guess people took the bar in in July and are just finding out now, maybe next week or so, if they passed or not. And if you're in that position where you're waiting to get bar results and then start applying for jobs, it's still a pretty strong market for you. And so apply to different places, different firm sizes, types of practice areas, and see what you get. You're probably gonna get multiple opportunities, and you have to pick out what aligns best with your interests and your passions.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is actually so significant, coming out of law school for a lot of the young lawyers, a lot of the people who pass the bar, is the market itself. Is that cyclical cycle? Is it down or is it up? And for some strange reason, I've had so many guests who have graduated law school right at 2008. So they came right into the financial crisis. And I've had so many stories on this podcast of people struggling for almost 2 years just to find a job, people taking odd jobs, working customer service for like a year. And these people are bar certified lawyers and they can't even get a job. So that's such an important point as well, because, they don't talk about it in law school about the job markets or anything like that, but it is still such a significant point and something that young lawyers should always, always be looking out for. Now, moving forward in your career after your year at Hinshaw and Culbertson, you became a partner. Well, not you became a partner, you became associate at Clarke and Silvergate, and you were there for almost, if I quickly do this math here, 26 years. You were there for 26 years.
That's right. I was there for a while.
Now,
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. It was a smaller firm, Hinshaw and Culbertson. I think at the time it was about 300 lawyers or so. I think now they're about 450. Chicago-based firm. I grew up in Chicago, so that was another reason I ended up going there. I just liked the idea that they were a Chicago-based firm. My experience as a law clerk and my experience practicing there was a little bit different, and I realized that I maybe wanted a smaller firm to go work for, and so I ended up at Clarke Silvergate, which is a boutique litigation firm, still is in Miami, and worked there for 26 years. First as an associate, then as a partner, and then left there just, I want to say, this past May. It hasn't been that long ago, just a few months ago. And ironically, I'm now back at a national defense firm. Goldberg Segalla is comparable, I guess you would say, or sort of the same ilk as a Hinshaw and Culbertson. It's sort of a national civil defense firm that serves clients on multiple states doing multiple types of matters. And so I guess I've come full circle in that regard and found that I needed a firm with a larger footprint because I have sort of a larger footprint online and just in other ways as well. And so to attract clients, serve clients, keep clients, I felt like I needed to make that transition. The firm I'd been with, great firm, great lawyers, great experience, great opportunities. But I thought for what I wanted to do for the next sort of phase of my career, I felt like I needed to go back to that sort of Hinshaw and Culbertson model. And then ended up at Goldberg Scala, which is a great firm that does a whole variety of matters in the civil defense space.
So, in reflecting on your time at Clarke and Silvergate, you indeed were there for 26 years. You started as an associate. You worked your way up as a partner, climbed that totem pole. Now, what suggestions do you have for people out there who are looking to become a partner at a law firm one day? In what ways or what things should they do in order to reach that partner peak? And what ways should you make yourself reliable? What tips do you have for people, for those young lawyers who aspire to be that partner?
I think on the one side, you really want to become really good at whatever practice area you're at that firm. You want to be considered an expert and above and beyond other lawyers in that field so that the firm recognizes that and that clients that you're serving, typically firm clients, appreciate you and the work you're doing. And on a parallel track, you're trying to develop relationships that will lead to referrals to lead to your own book of business. And for some firms, even to become a junior partner, you have to have a book of business. Others, not so much. But ultimately, if you want to become an equity partner, if you really want to have a significant role at your firm, no matter the size, you need to have your own clients and generate your own revenue. And so what I typically explain to people is that we really have two jobs. We have sort of the 9 to 5 or more like the 8:30 to 6:30 job of being a lawyer. That can run, between 45 and 50 hours a week, maybe a little bit more. And then we have this part-time job that is over above that, where we're trying to develop relationships, we're getting involved in organizations, maybe we're writing, perhaps we're speaking, and we're laying the foundation to lead to relationships that lead to referrals. And that takes a long time. It takes a lot of time investment in terms of time and energy. And the longer you wait on that, the further off you're pushing off your advancement because you're not doing the necessary steps to develop that work. So that's important, to kind of approach it on those two parallel tracks. You have your, I guess, day job, and I guess the other one is also kind of a day job, but it's an independent sort of extracurricular job that you need to focus on as well.
And that is something we love talking about on this podcast as well, is the business side of the law. Being able to build that book of business is so important when you're trying to get on that partner track and reach to become a partner. Now, in doing that, like you said, you got to cultivate those relationships to build those referrals. And that brings us to our networking question here. Now, for yourself, Mr. Frank Ramos, you have over 80,000, yes, I did say 80,000 followers on LinkedIn. So you have quite the wide net already. But in terms of suggestions for networking, what ways should people go about doing it? And what suggestions do you have for them? And how
I think there's,
important is it as well?
yeah, I think there's two tracks. There's sort of the in-person networking and the online networking. I'm very involved on LinkedIn, and I find that's the best platform for legal professionals. I have a account where I pay for, but you don't need that. I mean, that's probably because I'm very active on the platform. Most people I know who use it and use it well don't pay for that platform, and I've only been paying for a couple of years now. For the bulk of the time I've been on that platform, I've just used a free subscription. And so for no money, you can basically get on the platform, you can create a robust profile, and you can start reaching out to the people, start posting on a regular basis, and develop an online network that you can always take offline and see somebody in person. But I think that's important, is having an online presence, because that helps you reach people well beyond your geographic reach, wherever you are locally. And then on a parallel track, I tell people all the time that whether the firm will pay for it, or you have to pay for it out of your own pocket, to have 2 coffees a week with contacts. And basically, if you think about the cost for you having a cup of coffee and somebody else, let's say it's $10 or less per coffee date or coffee experience, and you do that twice a week, and you do that for 50 weeks out of the year, giving yourself 2 weeks off for vacation or whatever else. So that's 100 coffee dates at $10. It's about $1,000 investment, which seems like a lot of money, especially for a young lawyer. But that's 100 meetings you're having with people. And yes, some of them are with just classmates, former classmates or current classmates. Some of them are with opposing counsel. Some of them are with co-defense counsel. Some of them, maybe are just people you got to know through social media. But if you meet with 100 people every year, let's say for 20 to 30 minutes each time, and each person's obviously different at your local coffee shop, and you're doing that in the morning before it's disruptive and it's only for, it's not a big time suck, that's going to lead to something. Even if only 10 of those people, maybe even 5 of those people refer you something, then that's going to far out spend whatever cost you have for those coffees. That's going to eclipse that cost. And if you did that, let's say over 10 years, that's 1,000. Well, it's 1,000 meetings you're having. And whenever you travel, we can do that, whatever else. But imagine having, over a period of 10 years, 1,000 coffee meetings, and putting the time to get to know somebody for 20, 30 minutes for a cup of coffee. That will lead to referrals. And I think that is the most direct way of doing it. I think it's the easiest way of doing it. Meeting someone one-on-one versus going to a cocktail party and trying to have small talk. A little bit more challenging, especially if you're more introverted. A lot easier to just sit across somebody on a one-to-one basis. And sometimes they'll pick up the tab. Sometimes they don't want to get coffee. I think $1,000 is probably like the upper echelon in terms of what's going to cost you out of pocket. And maybe the firm is willing to subsidize that if you're at a place and you have some sort of budget for marketing. But I think that's the most direct and simplest approach. And it's an approach I always recommend to people. And I've had firms who, I had a firm that I think had about 10 lawyers and made each lawyer do this. And in a year, that was about 1,000 meetings. And they were able to track back about $2.5 million worth of business for basically $10,000 investment from the firm, which the firm decided to pay for. And they still do it. And, and you're thinking, well, how do I even know 100 people? We start, again, thinking about law school classmates, maybe college classmates, maybe high school classmates, thinking about other attorneys through bar associations, maybe a whole host of things. You'll get to that number pretty quickly. And I think most people are open to just, meeting up for coffee somewhere. It's not a huge investment. You're inviting them. They're going to drive over and, early one morning, or maybe in the evening, whatever it is. But it's it's quick, it's fast, it's cheap, and it's a great way of having that personal contact. So between being active online primarily or predominantly through LinkedIn and then meeting people for coffee, I think if you just did those two things, you'd probably find that you're laying the foundation for a lot of referrals during your career.
First, I have to say that $2.5 million return on the 100 coffee meetings or 1,000 coffee meetings that those 10 employees will have is absolutely, that's an insane stat. But I'd also say second, it goes back to that all-important message. Albert Einstein once said that the greatest mathematical discovery was compound interest. The
Right.
fact of having that exponential growth, of doing something every single day, you get that hockey stick up and to the right. So the more coffee meetings you have, the more people that you know, the more people, that person knows another person that can lead you to another person. It just grows and grows and grows. And it's such a beautiful thing. And it just goes back constantly being consistent, showing up to those coffee meetings just twice a week, because it's really not that much. It's really not that much time. You give it, an hour a week. It's not that bad. But you are quite the accomplished person. You were just listed on the best lawyers in America for defense work and personal injury. You also just recently won Lawyer of the Year for the best lawyers in Miami for 2025. You also won it in 2023. You also won it in 2020. You're a three-time winner. Probably won it more times. I probably just missed it. And as well, on top of that, you have published over 20 books, just to name a few: Law School to Litigator, The Associate Handbook, Deposition Drills, Getting Published for Lawyers, Strategic Planning for Law Firms, Attorney Marketing 101, as well as over 400 articles, which you are still producing on a weekly basis to this day. So, of course, you started this early in your career as a partner at Clarke and Silvergate. So why did you begin writing in the first place, and what do you write about?
Ironically, I started writing very early in my career because I was suffering from imposter syndrome. I didn't really think I knew anything. And so I was writing these short form how-to articles more for myself to prove I actually learned a thing or two. And they're getting published in local legal publications. Back then, everything was hard copy. It really wasn't digital. There was some digital, but mostly it was hard copy. And so you would have local newspapers, local legal newspapers or publications. That's what I was writing for. And I just kept doing it. And if you think about writing as, again, doing something consistently over time, let's say if you write 250 words a day forever, you're going to end up having a lot of output. And 250 words is basically a page, and it doesn't really take that long. And the more you do it, the faster and more efficient you get at it. So it was just something I started that never really stopped. And so along the way, I went from writing articles to books. I had a couple blogs along the way. I post daily now on LinkedIn. I still do, a number of articles, a number of other things, and white papers and so forth. So the type of writing, the style of writing, I guess, has evolved a bit. It's shorter, more precise, more confined, because I think we've all have shorter attention spans. But I still write, and I still probably write at least 250 words, if not more a day. That's just it became a habit. And so whatever you're going to do, where you're going to try to improve yourself, find a way to turn it into a habit, whether it's writing, maybe it's public speaking, maybe it's the coffee thing, maybe that first cup of coffee, you're like, I don't really want to get up early. I don't really want to meet anybody. I'm kind of an introvert. But you do it 4 or 5 times, suddenly it's not that bad. And by the 10th or 12th time, it's just, part of your routine. And 3 months into it, you've already met a bunch of people, and maybe you already start getting referral to, or someone calls you up about something, or at least calls your firm up. You're like, okay, well, I'm starting to see this pay off. And by the year end, you're really saying, oh, this is a really good idea. So whatever it is you want to do, do it consistently over time, and don't back off of it until you've done it long enough to fully appreciate whether or not it's going to pay off or not.
So, as myself being a philosophy student, I can't help myself from not talking about philosophy. And something you just mentioned there, having those habits, how important they are. Obviously, there's been newer books that have come out, especially Ryan Holiday. He comes out, The Daily Stoic. He always talks about habits. He's big into that. But if you go all the way back, the ancient Greeks, thousands of years ago, Aristotle in his Nicomachean Ethics was talking all about habits and how important they are to cultivate virtue, to cultivate those good habits, to ensure yourself again that exponential growth, as we were talking before, getting that hockey stick. And the great thing about the internet, the great thing about writing all these articles, making all these LinkedIn posts, is they don't go anywhere. They are not going
Right.
anywhere. They are timeless, and they will stay there forever. And they're a stamp of evidence for yourself, of course. I know early on you had that imposter syndrome, and now you have an insurmountable amount of evidence of, oh my God, you know what? I'm actually pretty good at this stuff. Look at all these articles I wrote. But something that I saw on your website that I saw was very, very interesting, very, very philosophical as well, is that living one's destiny is life-affirming, life-altering, and transformative, and this is what makes us interconnected. So can you explain that a little bit, what you mean by that?
Sure. I think each of us has a purpose, to do something beyond ourselves. And if you were to create a Venn diagram and find out where our talents, our dreams, and our passions intersect, and just draw that up on a whiteboard, that would be where your destiny or your purpose is. That's really where you're supposed to be. It's no coincidence that each of us have certain talents. It's no coincidence that we are passionate about certain things, or certain things keep us up at night. And there's no coincidence that there's an interrelationship between them. And so spending some time through introspection, figuring out what those are and whether they intersect, is a good way of figuring out where you need to be. And one of the books I wrote, forget the name of it exactly, but it really addresses that. It talks about sort of figuring out. The book was Go Motivate Yourself. The book was Go Motivate Yourself. And I think often we struggle with motivation and figuring out, well, we really want to do something. And often it's because it's not really what we should be doing, and it's hard to be motivated about something that's not intrinsic or inherent as to who we are. And so whenever I tell people about marketing, people may be like, well, I don't really want to do X. Like, well, what would you do if you could do it? It's like, well, I really want to write. And I say, okay, well, there's ways of doing that. It's like, well, I'm much extrovert. I don't really want to write, but I'd like to go to cocktail parties, whatever it is. Trying to figure out who you are and lining that up with whatever you need to do to accomplish whatever you're pursuing is really important. Because it's great to have goals, but if you really don't want to pursue them, then what's the point? You want to make sure that the ladder's up against the right wall, so you want to get to the top and realize you climbed the wrong building. So that was sort of my focus, and I try to help young lawyers figure that out, which is hard because even at 52, sometimes I'm kind of wondering what I'm supposed to be doing. But taking that time and undergoing that self-analysis is pretty important and critical in that regard.
Well, first, I'd just like to say I hope to write as many books as you one day where I'm struggling to remember what name I named the book because that's just amazing. But on top of all of that, to build on the point that you were making, indeed, it is important to find out what you want to do. So, say someone wants to write it, it also helps from an identity sort of perspective in that, okay, when I started this podcast before, I was like, okay, I want to be a podcaster. It's like, okay, talk to myself. Do I have a podcast? No, I didn't. Now I do. I can claim myself to be a podcaster. I have all these podcasts, so I can reassure myself that I am a podcaster, just like yourself. You want to be a writer. You have all these books. You have over 20 books, 400 articles. Of course, you're a writer. Look at the insurmountable evidence that you have for it. But in speaking on sort of finding one's destiny, from personal experience, where did you sort of have this epiphany of like, this may be the way, that there is this cross section between what we're good at, what we want to do, the dreams that we have, and that this is a part of our destiny. From personal experience, when did you have that sort of epiphany? If you did, indeed.
I think it was around the time I wrote the book, which I guess was around 2017 or 18. I forget exactly when I wrote it. And I had read lots of self-help books over the years, and there are a lot of gurus that you should follow. And I think that's the subtitle, stop chasing gurus and do the hard work. And it was always about, inspiration and motivation, which would always kind of taper off. And I'm wondering, well, is it really that? Is it like, do I just need to be motivated, or what's really going on here? And I realized that often when you're chasing the wrong thing for you, you can only do that so long until you run out of gas. There's just no way you're going to, for a lifetime, much less for a few years, do something that you really don't want to do. I don't care how much self-discipline you have, how much self-control you have. At some point you realize this just isn't for me. It's kind of that scene from Forrest Gump when he's running across the country and he's just running and running, and he has this huge beard and his shoes are he's all disheveled, his shoes are all broken up, and he's like 30 or 40 people running after him. And at one point he says, okay, I'm done. I'm not running anymore. And that's it. He walked away. Because at some point you're chasing after something and you realize, well, why am I doing this? So first anchoring yourself and figuring out, okay, this is where I need to be. This is my North Star. This is my lodestar. It's where I need to be, is really important. And different people reach that understanding or appreciation at different stages in their life. And sometimes, and you always have to make sure, or at least be reasonably sure, that this is what you really want. Um, and then pursue it wholeheartedly. People always say you have to have something to fall back on. You have to have a plan B. I'm not a huge fan of that because it's really easy to always fall back on something if you have something to fall back on. Sort of like that, the burning the ships analogy where, the Spanish explorers came and they burned the ships so they couldn't go back. They had to live in the new world now. There's literally no going back to that. So figuring that out and then being committed to that, that's really the approach. And I think if you've settled on the right thing for you, you still need self-discipline. I just need some motivation. But the thing is what really is attracting you. It's sort of like a magnet pulling you into itself.
Now, in having this vision of what you want to do, your dreams, the cross section between finding that purpose, finding what you want to do in your life, it is always, as I've come to find, very, very important to be specific about your goals. Like you said, to be somewhat reasonable about the goals you want to reach. Of course, I could be like, oh, I'd love to build a rocket to Mars. I know I can't do that. And I could say it, I could work towards a little bit, but I probably can't accomplish it. So would you say it's very important to be specific with your goals in terms of what you want to do and where you're going?
I do. And I think goals should be very specific in the sense that if you're going to develop business, I don't think the goal should be, I'm going to develop $1 million over this year. I mean, I guess that's one approach. My approach would rather be, I'm going to have 100 coffees this year. That's something that you can look at and do. And at the end of the year, you've had 100 coffees. And it's like, I made that goal. And business should come of it. I don't know what it might be, but that's the goal. I don't think the goal should be I'm gonna make $1 million because that's very amorphous. And how do you get there? When it comes to losing weight, it's like, oh, I want to lose 50 pounds this year. Well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. But maybe the goal is that I'm going to reduce my caloric intake by 10%, or I'm going to increase my activity level by 10%. And I can measure that on my smartwatch or whatever else. And that's my goal. And if I pursue that and do it consistently, and I meet that goal daily and weekly and monthly, I'm going to lose weight. I don't know how much, but I'll be better off a year later than I am now. And so whatever the goal you're setting for yourself, I mean, I guess the larger goal is, yeah, I want to look better, feel better. I want to make more money, whatever it is. But that's not really the goal in the sense of that's not really the line of demarcation. The line of demarcation is a specific act that you're doing on a regular basis, probably daily basis, no less than weekly. And you're doing it consistently over time. And you're going to measure that and see what's happening from that. And that's, I think, a much better approach.
I'll tell you what, I've heard demarcation in my philosophy classes more than probably 1,000 times, but that's the first time I ever heard anyone talk about it on the podcast. So you got me excited now. But I always love to do my searching. And of course, I saw at the bottom of your website, you had a quote of the day, and it was all about working harder. You may not be as good as the other trial lawyer, may be more experienced than you, so you got to work harder, continue to work harder. So can you talk about that quote, how important it is to just keep working harder?
I think no matter what your skill set is, no matter how intelligent you are, no matter how great of a public speaker or orator you are, if you put in the time, the effort, it's going to pay off. And if you're passionate about being a trial lawyer, if you keep at it, you will become a good trial lawyer. And that's true for any profession, any career, whatever you're trying to pursue. There's no substitute for hard work. I think planning is important. I think having a goal is important, but at the end of the day, that is 10% of the equation. 90% of the equation is showing up and doing the work consistently over time. And if you do that and you don't stop doing that, it will pay off. Now, the more time you put into it, the more effort you put into it, it'll probably pay off sooner than later. There's no direct correlation or equation I can provide as to when it will pay off. That's very much a person by person, circumstance by circumstance situation. But I've never seen somebody who consistently puts in the time and not get the payoff. So I think it really comes down to rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work.
Now, as we said before, you are indeed the Miami mentor. You're going around, you're helping all these young lawyers to achieve their dreams and all their aspirations, to shoot for the stars and land on the moon. Now, where exactly did this Miami mentor? First of all, I love the name, so I need to find out where the I know it's very simple, but I want to know the origin story and what exactly do you do as the Miami mentor?
It's funny. I came up with this website. I think it was during the pandemic, or maybe it was before the pandemic. I forget exactly when I created it, and I needed a name. And I was trying to just use my name, but my name was already taken for the website. And these days, it's hard to come up with an original name that you can actually type in on the Google search and pull it up. And I thought, okay, well, this is about a mentoring. And so I tried mentoring. A lot of that was taken, and so it really was a process of elimination. Miami Mentor happened because I tried 100 other things and I couldn't use them because it was already taken. I wanted just basically www.whateveritwas.com, and every other thing that I had tried wasn't working. So I ended up in Miami Mentor more for lack of other choices I had that just weren't domains that were available.
So
Not very sexy, but that's the true story.
listen, that's all right. I had a similar sort of way. I put it into a AI chatbot and I told it to give me a bunch of names. And I think I did it 3 times. So I got like 10 names. I didn't like any of them. I got another 10 names. I didn't like any of them. And I got the third 10 names. I look around, I saw lawyers in the making. I was like, okay, stop right there. I'm just gonna take that one. That one sounds perfect. So very similar on my end, that it was really just a process of elimination of finding that one that could sort of stuck with me. I was like, ooh, this is a good one. Now, I saw on a recent LinkedIn post, you're talking that people, as you said before, you have that sort of short term, so you're making shorter articles, but there's a lot of the loss in the art of patience. I love talking about art forms. Everything I view is an art form. Professional wrestling, that's an art form. I'll tell you what, I could go all day about how much is an art form. There's so much that goes into it. I won't do it to you or the audience, I promise. But where did you come to the conclusion that there is a loss in the art of patience in waiting and in postponing enjoyment?
I think just I'm 52, and when I was a kid, things were a lot simpler then, for better or for worse. And there were no smartphones, no smartwatches. Our family was not a very wealthy family, so I didn't even have cable, even though cable was starting to come into season. I think it was until high school that we got a VCR. Maybe it was eighth grade, perhaps. So what I had was just whatever was available. It was I would go to get a book, I would go to the local bookstore. More likely than I would go to the library. If I wanted to watch a show, I had to be in front of the television set in a certain day and time. If I wanted to go to the movies, I had to buy a ticket and go to the local theater. If I wanted to hear a song, I had to wait till that song came on the radio or buy a record. And so you learned to be patient. You learned to kind of accept what was going on. There's a comedian, I forget what his name is, and he does this routine, which I find this hilarious. He talks about mindfulness. And he talks about how mindfulness has become such an important thing now and how we're trained to be mindful. And he says part of the reason was that we were all mindful when we were kids. He's about my age, and said, you were on the bus, you didn't have anything else to do except look at the condensation. You were mindful. You rented a movie, you had to rewind the cassette. You were mindful. You went to the bathroom. There was nothing to read while you were going to the bathroom. You were being mindful. And so it was a different time where just by definition, we weren't strapped to our phones 24/7. And there was not a constant source of distraction where everything we wanted was at our fingertips exactly when we wanted it. We can order food, we can order a car, we can look at any movie or song or video, talk to people, around the world. Back when I was a kid, unless they lived in the same county, it was a long distance call and your parents would freak out. Now we can WhatsApp and whatever else and talk to people wherever they are. So that transition has changed so that we want everything we want when we want it right now. And because of that, our attention spans have gotten shorter. And also, we're constantly bombarded with information. So, I don't know about you, but between emails and text messages and notifications and LinkedIn notifications and just news notifications, my phone goes off every few seconds. So the idea that we have the ability to concentrate for anything on a long period of time is just antiquated. It's just anachronistic. It just doesn't really happen anymore. And so who we are, we're just wired differently. And I'm of an age where I'm not too old to ignore all this stuff. I have to, I have kids a certain age and I'm of a certain age, but I'm old enough to remember when none of this happened. The 50 somethings of the world were in this weird middle group where we didn't have technology, or we had very rudimentary technology. And now we have this really advanced technology, and we've experienced all of it. And we still remember what it was like, not having it, but now we do. And we're not old enough to ignore it. We have to adopt to it. So it's an interesting to see that transition, to remember a time where we by definition had to be mindful, and now we have to embrace mindfulness because there's so many distractions and so many things coming at us all at once.
It's an absolute truth that the past 30 years has been one of the most technological revolutions or evolutions, I may say, that we have ever seen. Of course, 1990, there was no iPhone, and then you fast forward 15 years later, everyone's got an iPhone. It's in everyone's pocket, it's in everyone's hands. You can call anyone anytime, you can text anyone anytime, you get in contact with anyone across the world. So it totally changed the world, and it's absolutely shaped the experience of so many people, especially even myself. I even realized that my attention span may be shorter than it would have been if I grew up in the 80s or the 70s or the 90s or something like that. But my thing that I try my hardest to always do, I always try to read books because it always gives you that patience. Of course, if it's like a 400-page book, I'm not going to get the page 400 in 5 minutes like I can with a YouTube video. So I always try to be mindful of that. Reading is always a place where I could be the most mindful, where I can get those through those long books and be able to, have that patience to be able to get all the way to the end, have that satisfaction of getting into the end, and also giving myself a little bit of a wider attention span as well. That's just what I do. I don't know what anyone else does. I don't know what other suggestions I could give. That's just from my personal experience. But we haven't even got to speak about what you're doing currently today as a partner at Goldberg and Segalla. You started there in May of this year. So how has it been so far? And what do you seek for the future as you work there?
Oh, things have been great. Like you said, I'm a partner here. I do a lot of the same work I did before, a mix of commercial products and general liability. I'm handling cases throughout the state of Florida and working on behalf of a variety of clients and on behalf of a variety of matters. It just provides a larger footprint. It's a bigger team, a big marketing team, big management team. So a lot more resources to rely upon and implore and use in pursuing clients and serving clients. So it's basically just the same, but sort of a larger presence on all aspects and on all fronts. So people have been great. People have been wonderful here. They've been very supportive and provided me everything I need to make sure I flourish and in return to help the firm flourish. So it's been a great experience.
And also, speaking of flourishing, you yourself, you got so much content. You also got training videos, just to name a few. You got deposition skills, attorney marketing, the associate life, associate do and don'ts, and LinkedIn for lawyers. And I want to key in on LinkedIn for lawyers. Of course, you are the expert on this subject matter. As we said before, over 80,000 followers on LinkedIn. So what suggestions do you have for people who are on LinkedIn, who are just starting out, who are also lawyers? They may be law students, they may be aspiring law students, but what suggestions do you have for them in terms of starting their LinkedIn journey and getting the wheels going?
I think first, look at your profile, make sure you have a good photo, a good background photo or stock photo of the background. Don't just say, attorney at so and so firm. Have some captivating byline for yourself so that kind of catches people's attention. Provide sort of first person biography, include all the information regarding your education and your job experience. And if you have links to publications or videos, put all that in there. So pretty much have a very robust profile page. So if anybody wants to find out anything they can about you, it's there or it's linked to something there. And then pick a topic or topics that you want to write about. Typically, it would be your primary subject area that you work on, because you know that area and it's easy to write about. And then get into the habit of posting about that on a regular basis, preferably every day, but at least every other day or a couple of times a week. And if at first you're having a hard time with content, think about something you've already written, a slide that you prepared or whatever it is. Let's say you gave a presentation on a specific topic, you had 20 slides in your slide deck, and each slide had some pertinent piece of information. Each of those slides could be a post on that topic, and you can do a series of posts. And that's a good way of getting into the habit of using LinkedIn. You download it on your phone with the app, you do it on your laptop or your desktop. And there's two parts of getting used to it. One is the actual physicality of typing in the the prompt or the post or whatever it is, which I believe is limited to about 2,600 characters. And the 2 is actually the idea, like coming up with the idea. And those are separate. And so if you initially have something you can basically cannibalize for a few weeks while you get into the habit of doing the physicality of it, that's a good way of starting. Finding an article or publication or something you've done or written or presented on, and turn that into a series so you get into the habit of posting. And then once, and you do that maybe with a few articles, maybe you have enough content for an entire month. And clearly it takes about a month to just get into the habit of doing anything. But maybe it was only for a week or two, but that's fine. And then you start thinking, maybe you write it on a little notepad or you keep it on your notes on your phone, other ideas that are in that same practice area. Maybe it's a recent case, an article about whatever topic you're talking about, some change in the law, maybe some practice tip. And then the more you do it, the more you get into the habit of it, the easier it gets. It'll be easier to come up with an idea. It'll be easier to reduce the idea to writing. It'll be easier to share that idea. And I found when I started doing posts daily, which I think it was, I want to say in the summer of 2016, it took about a month to get really into the habit of it. And it took about 6 weeks or so to easily come up with ideas. And now it's just very second nature. Ideas just kind of come to me because I've been doing it so long now. And, it may be an interaction with somebody, maybe something we talk about in this podcast may brandish an idea that I want to share, maybe something else that happens, but it becomes just very second nature. So that's really the process. Have a very thoughtful, detailed, impactful profile, and then come up with a topic where you're posting on a regular basis, preferably daily, and then just do that indefinitely.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, the Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablasser.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. What I think is so fascinating is I don't think anyone has came on here and talked about having a robust LinkedIn profile, how important it is to have everything in one place, to have the links as well. I know one of the features on LinkedIn where you could have a link in your bio where it is to all your publications. You yourself have it to your website. I myself have it to my podcast, and just little things like that direct people where they need to go, where they're going straight to your work, and they can figure out, okay, this is who it is, this is what he does, this is all his work. Stuff like that is just so important, including the picture, the background. All that stuff is so integral to getting people to your profile, to growing that following, because it just, first, it looks very, very professional. And second, it's easier for the consumer himself to, or herself, to sort of figure out where all your work is, to be directed in places where they need to be. So I think that was just so important and a great way to do it. Now, Frank, we're now down to our last 5 questions. The first of the 5 questions is something I have seen throughout my entire journey doing this podcast, is that the law is moving in a certain direction, just like yourself, that people are being less mindful maybe than they once were many, many years ago. As the advent of technology, the legal field is now moving in a certain way with all new AI technologies, software technologies, whatever they may be. Now, this is the tech stack question per se. What does your tech stack look like, and what suggestions of technologies, AI software, whatever they may be, that you use in your work life, your daily life, whatever it may be?
I use a lot of the open models. I use ChatGPT 4.0 and Claude 3.5, I guess, and Perplexity. And I use them on the daily to help me really brainstorm. I don't really use them for your traditional legal research and writing. I use them to think through a case. Obviously, they're open platforms and not including or sharing or uploading confidential, proprietary, HIPAA-protected information. I'm keeping things generic in terms of my prompting, but it allows me to re-envision and take a different approach to my cases. And I find those tools to be very useful. Each is $20 a month. So all in, I'm paying out my own pocket, but $720 a year. Again, it's not a huge expense, and it makes me a much better lawyer.
Yeah, Perplexity is a new one I just found as well. I believe it was 2 or 3 months ago, but it has definitely become my favorite open model out there. Of course, I still love ChatGPT. That is something I've been following since senior year of high school, so almost 5 years ago that I've been on the ChatGPT train. But with Perplexity now, I think it's better than ChatGPT. That's just me. Maybe a controversial hot take there, but I think those are all great recommendations. And of course, they're great for coming up with ideas. I do it all the time. I literally talk to those open models for hours on end, just trying to figure out some ideas, trying to get different perspectives on things, because it's like talking to another person, and a really, really smart person at that. They have all the data in the entire world at their hands, so they're going to give you something good eventually. But fourth to last question here, as we were talking about before, the self-help books, trying to stay away from the gurus sometimes, but this is live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast. Frank Ramos, what are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books. You could throw in your own books as well. Something that you give a gift to someone.
That book, the Stoicism book, are great. I forget the title of the book. The Obstacle is the Way, I believe, is the name of the title. It's a great book. I think what we often find is that there's certain challenges and we get really frustrated at them, and we don't appreciate that the challenge becomes the way, that we need the challenge or the obstacle or the issue or the mountain or the valley to present itself to make us stronger, better, more agile, more adaptive. And often when we want things to be easy, it doesn't really make for strong people. And so embracing the suck, as they say, is important.
Of course, wonderful recommendation. But now we're down to our third question. What are the sorts of things that you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis, either that be through social media, so LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, people still use Facebook, anything like that? Any podcasts you listen to that you recommend for people, any Substacks, any people on LinkedIn? What is crossing the transom of Frank's mind on a daily basis?
I write and speak a lot on AI. So every day I will go on Google, I will go on X, I will go on a podcast platform like the ones that are accesses all of them, whether it's Apple or another one, and I'll type in AI and law or AI and law firms and see what is new. And every day there are more articles, more conversations, Reddit conversations on it as well. Podcasts, YouTube videos on a topic. I try to consume probably about an hour's worth of content each day on that topic. I'm very much in that space. And I think whatever you want to become an expert in, the content is out there. And so finding the appropriate platforms that augment and collect and gather all that data information for you and doing the searches there, whether it's audio, video, or text, and consuming it that way, I think is a good approach.
Yeah, just like as we were talking about before with the technological evolution that has happened, there are two sides to the story. Of course, there's so much information that you could get so overwhelmed, you could get so sucked in, just like myself being stuck on Instagram Reels for 30 minutes at a time and then realizing, wow, I've been on here for so long. But there's also that other side of the story where, oh my God, there's so much information. There's so many things that you can learn, so many things that you could teach yourself as well, even very simple things. Like I know people on like YouTube, a lot of people on TikTok like teach people to like build houses now. You can build like a shed. You can just look it up on YouTube and figure it out yourself very much. I do it for a lot for my cooking because I like to get interesting down there. I have a great time in the kitchen, I must say. But second to last question here, Frank. You're working, you're doing an hour on AI Law every day, but what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Frank?
Most Friday nights I'm pretty tired, to be honest. I'm coming home, spending some time with the dogs and my wife, and we have 2 adult boys, and we may hang out and probably just veg in front of the television, and probably knock out early. Sunday mornings, typically walking the dogs, go to church, visiting my father is still around. He just turned 90 this past summer. I live a pretty low-key life. So nothing exciting on my end. My weekends are pretty much mirror each other, and they kind of go through the same plan, and I kind of follow the same steps each Friday through Sunday.
Well, I'll tell you what, there is beauty in simplicity. And of course, congratulations to your father for hitting 90 years old. My grandfather is as well. I think he just reached 93 years old. So he is getting up there in the age, but his mind is still $1 billion, and we still have such great conversation. So it's great to hear that. But we're now down to our last question, which I say at the end of every single episode. But Frank, what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
I think the best thing you can do is, you're here for a reason. You went to law school for a reason. You're a lawyer for a reason. You put in the time, you put in the effort, put in the energy. It's easy to doubt yourself, but everybody who you look up to doubted themselves at some point, and they worked through it, pushed themselves through, and they got to the other end. So give it time, just do the hard work, and you'll get there.
Beautifully said, Frank. As we said before, it's so important. Keep following that hockey stick, because eventually you'll start going up. And once you see it go up, there's no looking back. But Frank, that is the episode. That is the podcast. So thank you so much for coming on here. Spread your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out. LawyersInTheMaking.substack.com. Lawyers in the Making, one word, substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.